Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here. Oh my gosh, we are actually breaking news. We have Sarah McAbee. She's the co-founder and executive director of Stand in the Gap Foundation, and her husband is actually a J6 prisoner. And we are breaking news, Sarah. So welcome to Veronica Live. Literally, this just broke as you got on with us here. So tell us what's happening so that the world knows.
Yeah, so the 1512 charge is the obstruction of justice, obstruction of an official proceeding. And that charge is an overzealous overreach of the federal government to these January 6 defendants, where they said because they had to stop the certification of the vote, anybody thereafter had been charged with it. So 330 defendants are now going to have their cases reheard at the district court level. Most of them will be resentenced. Some of them are currently sitting in jail. They have now served over their time for their other charges, so they will be released.
Yay!
And so
oh
this
my
is
gosh.
huge news for
I literally have
January
tears
6th
in my
and their
eyes.
families.
I have tears in my, and I have goosebumps.
I
have goosebumps talking to you right now.
Taking this to the Supreme Court was definitely, were the justices going to uphold this? And that was the real question. We heard live arguments back in April about it and how the government came out swinging. But at the end of it, you could tell the justices were like, so you're telling me that you're charging these people with a crime that basically they did not commit. And so this is definitely a win for the January 6th community.
Well, I don't know how you're not crying because I'm just so moved by this. This is so amazing. So tell us about your husband and where he is, and hopefully he's one of the ones that now gets the clean slate here.
Well, unfortunately, he's not. He was never charged with the 1512 charge, which we were very thankful for, because that charge really, honestly, why the government got away with what they did was because nobody was questioning this 1512, and because there's a 99.6 conviction rate among January 6 defendants in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And so the prosecution was just throwing charges up against the wall like mud, seeing what would stick. And that 1512 charge started to stick, and so they had to charge these individuals because of the weight that it carried at sentencing. And so while my husband, Colton, is not charged with it, my business partner, Shane Jenkins, is. And so I can tell you right now, there's some happy men dancing in their cells across America.
Wow.
Now, wasn't there also a terrorism enhancement? Didn't the Supreme Court also throw that out recently?
So there was different enhancements. The appeals court, the second highest court in the land, the circuit court, threw out the enhancement of the 1512, which was an 11-point enhancement. Now, the terrorism enhancement, no. They did throw out enhancements recently saying that you can't, charge somebody, have them go through trial, and then get to sentencing and throw a terrorism enhancement or any enhancement on them. The enhancement needs to go through the jury. So that was another win hopefully for January 6 defendants, that their attorneys can now go back and say, listen, you threw these, huge enhancements on my client, yet the jury had no idea that you were going to do that at sentencing.
And what exactly did your husband do to end up in prison? I mean, because so many of these people, we've had the author of the Gulag Chronicles that he's told us all of these stories. What did your husband actually do, Sarah?
So Colton was a law enforcement officer for 7 years, and he found himself after he had heard the Trump speech. He said peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard down at the Capitol. And so he went with the crowd down to the Capitol, and he found himself at the Lower West Terrace Tunnel where waves of violence had happened. And as he was standing there was a mass pileup of people at the mouth of the tunnel because the police officers were shoving people out, and there was no room for them. And so the people were piling up. And so the protesters were very upset about how the cops were handling these situations. Now, mind you, 10 minutes before, a woman named Victoria White was viciously beaten by Captain Bagshaw in the tunnel as well. And so you have an array of chaos happening. And so as these people are getting pushed out, there was an officer that was drug out into the crowd, and he couldn't get to that officer. But there was an officer, Metropolitan Police Officer Andrew Waite, who was laying on the ground, and he looked like starfish. And so he got in and he put his foot in between his legs so the protesters could not pull his legs. and he went to go pick up this officer. When he went to go pick up the officer, another Metropolitan Police officer, Devontae Powell, hit him in the head and busted his head open with a baton.
Oh, my gosh.
And and so he pops up, he readjusts his hat, and he tells them, I'm trying to give help. I know how to give help. Let me do that. And he looks over, and Roseanne Boylan is lying on the ground, unconscious, unarmed, and a Metropolitan Police officer, Lila Morris, is beating Roseanne Boylan. And so he's trying to get to her, and he says, stop killing that girl.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
as he's doing that, another Metropolitan Police officer, Carter Moore, comes up and shoves him, and he shoves him back, open-handedly shoves him back to create space. And he is trying to communicate with these officers that he is helping. He has a sheriff patch on, and he's one of them trained to do what they do. And so, unfortunately, the protesters did pull the officer's legs down the stairs, and he tumbled down the stairs with them. And he's over top of this officer on his hands and knees, protecting him from this crowd. And he says, are you ready? And the officer says, get off of me. And he said, I'm helping you. I'm one of you. And he said, I know. Help me up. So he rolls him over to his side, walks him back up the stairs to the line of officers. And then Colton goes to find Roseanne because they moved her body away from the mouth of the tunnel. And so he's looking through a bag of medical supplies, feeling for a pulse for her. They decide to pick her up, go back to the line of officers, and he starts to give her chest compressions, and the officers pick her up by her ankles and drag her away like she's a dead animal. So he's standing there in such disbelief of what he had just witnessed, and another officer, Stephen Sagamont, looks at him and thanks him twice. Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate you for your help today. And then the crowd surges, and he's standing there. Colton's shoulder is broken. He's standing there, and his hands are just up on his sides, like, open face, like, I'm not a threat to anybody. And the officer puts his arm around him with his baton to protect him and says, I got you. All right, I got you. Just chill out. And then once the crowd disperses, a Good Samaritan comes and gets Colton and takes him to a medical tent for his head and his shoulder. So the entire thing that I just told you was about 7 minutes of his life. All of it is on body camera footage. And so when he told me what had happened, I thought he would receive an award for helping these individuals in the mix of chaos. And unfortunately, in August of 2021, they came and apprehended him. They raided our home, and he has been detained ever since. He waited 26 months for trial, and he waited 32 months to be sentenced. And so he was he was convicted on all charges, and he was handed down a 70-month sentence.
Wow. And how long has he been in prison now of that 70 months?
34 months. 35 months. He will be released in August of 2026.
Oh, my goodness. Sarah. And do you have children, Sarah, too?
No. So thankfully we don't, and that's why I have been able to do what I have done through Stand in the Gap and the Real J6 to help these individuals, because there's 1,500 January 6 defendants across America, and a lot of them have had their lives absolutely destroyed at the hands of the federal government. And so I believe that the Lord put me in this position to be able to fight for these individuals.
And how often have you been able to see Colton? How many times have you seen him?
Since he was arrested initially, I've seen him 7 times. Now, going back to the way these individuals were treated, once they apprehended him in August of 21, I did not see him again until April of 2023. It was a year and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Before I was able to see him, because they denied these individuals visitation. They denied them haircuts. They denied them religious services. Whatever they could try to do to destroy these individuals, they did. And thankfully, we had some fighters in Congress that said, you know what, even scum of the earth, murderers and rapists and child molesters get visitation. These individuals deserve visitation.
And is he in D.C.? Where is he, Colton?
He is now serving his time in federal prison now that he has been sentenced. But from the time he was apprehended through his sentencing date, he spent the majority of his time in the D.C. Gulag.
And then were you able to, because the author that wrote that book, The Chronicles of the Gulag, there was letters. Were you able to communicate? How often could you communicate with him through letters? during that time you couldn't see
we
him?
could. I mean, it just depended, if they decided to send their letters out, if they decided to let the letters in. I mean, it was a very rough period of time because even sometimes when they moved him around, we didn't know where he was until he got to where he was going. It was like they kidnapped him. When he was in D.C., the way the facility and the guards treated them, it was just, that we would go weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks without talking to these individuals because they would cut off their communication.
And what has kept him going, and what has kept you going with all of this? Is he healthy? Is he doing okay in prison?
Yeah, now that he is in federal prison, it is a little bit better. I mean, prison is prison, right? But it is different than being held in D.C. D.C., whatever you hear about the D.C. gulag, just amplify it about 10 times. It's just a horrific mess. And no individual. I think what this process has shown is that, our prison system is stuck back in the early 1900s, and it shouldn't be that way.
I agree.
These individuals, most of them, that are awaiting trial, clearly they're not convicted. They have rights, but even after you've been convicted, you have rights, and you shouldn't treat these individuals as animals. And so that's really what we've focused on. This has given me a whole new perspective of life, and I will say that it's our faith that has got us through this. I believe the Lord has chosen these individuals, and even the ones on the outside fighting for them. But our fight is far from over because we always say, it started with January 6th for us. We might have been ignorant to it prior to this. It started with January 6th for us, but that's not where it's going to end because there are American citizens that are locked up that shouldn't be locked up, or if they are, it's been an overzealous, over-egregious reach by the federal government.
Go ahead, John.
I just say at the debate last night, the subject came up, and what kind of got me was Biden's visceral hatred of the people from January 6th. I mean, it was you could just see that these people were out for revenge. They wanted a pound of flesh, and hopefully, God willing, Trump will get elected and pardon or commute the sentences or whatever of all these people, on January 21st or whatever. But what did you think of the way Biden was talking about these Americans that are in jail?
I agree absolutely with President Trump said last night, where he said you should be ashamed of yourself for how you've treated these individuals and their families, and they absolutely should be ashamed. They allowed them to overtake when President Trump was inaugurated in 2016. They burned down buildings, they destroyed broken windows, destroyed businesses, and then they did it again during the Summer of Love in 2020. Yet they say that January 6th was an attack on democracy. It was worse than 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. What shame on them for even saying that, because it's nowhere near what those families have had to go through. And that I can't even believe that statement was made by the sitting vice president at the time. And ultimately, what this has done is they have taken these individuals to instill fear in the American public. That's what it's done. They say, if you question your government, we're going to throw you in jail and we're going to throw away the key. And so that's why since January 6th, you haven't seen mass numbers. You don't see people marching on Washington and saying, let our people go. You don't see that because it has instilled fear into the American people to say, you know what, if they're going to do it to them, then they're going to do it to me. And we were test subjects for what they have done to Donald Trump. That's what it was.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've started this foundation, Stand in the Gap. So tell us about that, because I was looking at it. It's really beautiful. Operation Love Wins. You're able to get families to see loved ones because, when we had that author on, a lot of these people have been ruined financially because the person in prison now was the breadwinner. So tell us about your foundation, this part of it, Operation Love Wins, and how you're helping these families.
Yeah, so this was birthed, beauty out of the ashes is what we say. And a lot of people were ignorant to the way these individuals were treated prior to January 6th. And then just January 6th defendants, unfortunately, just had everything, the books thrown at them. And so because these individuals were not able to see their loved ones for 2 years, they couldn't see their children, their spouses. It was only communication via phone, not even video visits. They didn't have that capability. And so after Congressional member Troy Nehls went into the D.C. jail and got them in-person visitation, they got the news and they were ecstatic for, about 2 hours. And then it kind of wore off where they were like, wow, I can't financially afford to bring my family to D.C. for a 1-hour visit. And so we launched Operation Love Wins overnight, and we fund families to go reconnect with their loved ones. And we don't do it only for D.C. anymore. We do it across the nation now that these individuals have been sent to federal prison, because we understand that the family unit is so important, and that's what keeps individuals going. And then from that, we have started to do other things, such as appellant attorneys. So as I mentioned, it's a 99.6 conviction rate among January 6 defendants in D.C. And so we're like, why are we funding defense attorneys when it doesn't really matter if you have the best defense attorney that you've paid $1 million for, or if you have a public defender, you are judged by a day on the calendar versus your actions that day. And so we fund appellant attorneys for individuals to take their case to the circuit court, second highest court in the land, and even maybe eventually to the Supreme Court, because they have the federal government has tried to destroy these people financially, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and then some of them physically. And we just can't stand for that as Americans. We cannot stand idly by and watch this happen to good people. And so that's where Stand in the Gap came from. We believe these individuals stood in the gap for us on January 6th. I know so many people that were like, oh, I wish I could have been there. I would have been there. They went for us to question the government and send the votes back to the states for the fraud. And instead, they've sacrificed so much. And so now we call on Americans to stand in the gap for them.
Wow.
Well, you got to wonder what happened to our right to petition the government. I mean, that's a basic. Let's just start at the basics.
Yeah, your American rights have been railroaded. They've been thrown out the window. The current regime does not care about the Constitution. They don't care about your First Amendment right. They don't care about your Sixth or your Eighth Amendment right. They do what they want because we, the people, continue to allow it to happen.
So your husband is a law enforcement member. What's his attitude now about, after seeing, what the way the FBI was used, all these government resources were used against him? He took an oath to, protect and defend the Constitution. Just Veronica and I are both former military, same thing, and what is it changed his perspective on what America is?
Oh, it absolutely has. I believe a lot of individuals go into the law enforcement career field to make a difference. They're public servants. They feel like they're called to help their community. And unfortunately, after for so long, you become corrupted by the system. So you turn a blind eye, or, you yourself are not doing the correct things, following the right protocol. Because even the agencies that he worked for, the FBI told them to shut up and not say anything. They were not even allowed to talk to me. And his question has always been, where is the loyalty? If the tables would have been turned, they would have done the exact same thing that I did. And yet now they're not here to stand in my defense and even say, hey, this was a good man. This was a good officer. And the three-letter agencies have absolutely been weaponized. Federal law enforcement has been weaponized against its people. And it's a shame that it has come to this.
So what does your husband say? Because we've had, and I know people that were there that day, and they felt like there was definitely instigators that weren't Trumpers in the crowd. Has your husband said that too, Sarah?
Absolutely. Because if you follow the timelines of everything, it just doesn't make sense. By the time they start firing into the crowd, the way Ray Epps had gotten out of there, when a flare went up, the way they were instigating these people, you had individuals that were bussed in, and then they went to these vendors and bought brand new Trump apparel and dressed in head to toe. They were hiding out in the bushes, changing. They definitely had not only did they have different 3-letter agencies, confidential human sources on the ground. There were definitely agitators that were bussed in by other organizations to wreak chaos.
Yeah, that was one of the things that amazed me during the congressional testimony. And I think it was Ted Cruz that was asking Director Wray, say, did you have any confidential, human resources or informants and in the crowd? And he says, well, I can't answer that. And he's like, the answer should be no, not I can't answer that. The answer should have been no. And that, I think, tells you everything you need to know about what was really going on from the government's perspective. They were instigating a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think it tells you everything you need to know that 3.5 years later, such as last night at a presidential debate, they are still pushing a narrative of an insurrection, that these individuals are domestic terrorists, and they won't have a true investigation. When the Republican House took over, the January 6th committee shredded 117 documents so that they would never have access, because that was a sham committee, a show trial done by HBO and all of these, news agencies on primetime TV. And you've never had a true investigation into what happened that day. They don't talk about the pipe bomb. They don't talk about the individuals that were undercover that day. 3.5 years later, they are still pushing this false narrative. And that's how you know there is more to the story, when they don't want to know the truth.
So tell me, Sarah, because, Tucker Carlson I think he lost his job because he was pushing the footage. So what have you seen via footage and body cams? And then McCarthy kept saying he was going to release all the damn footage. And I don't know why we haven't seen every single minute of that footage. So what is your thought about all of that? I bet, I'm sure they've deleted stuff. I mean, you're saying they shredded documents, which I'm sure they've deleted plenty too.
They don't want you to see the footage, because what you're going to see is police officers like Officer Bagshaw beating Victoria White. You're going to see Lila Morris beating Roseanne Boylan. You're going to see the police officers retaliating against these individuals. There's a woman, an elderly woman, that's standing on the steps in front of the police officers, and they shove her off the steps. What they did was they not only did they wage war on the American people on January 6th, but the police officers most of the time started it. It shows that our nation's capital is protected by an untrained police force, that is not how you handle any sort of situation. You have Michael Byrd, who shot Ashley Babbitt without any use of force, continuum taken, and they don't want that information getting out. That is why they have hid the videos for so long, because video evidence is irrefutable.
I mean, I just feel like we are such a third world country right now, and what Trump has endured as well. I mean, at least he's a billionaire and has money, but I'm worried because, he's going to be sentenced here, and I think they're going to put him in jail. I mean, we've had so many fancy people on the show, and they're like, Veronica, be prepared. He's going to be going to jail. So do you feel that that's going to happen to Trump in July as well, to keep him off the street from talking?
Yes. No, I absolutely believe that. They want him off the campaign trail. They don't want him to run for president, because the thing is they have done this against him, right? These individuals are evil. The people running this country right now are evil. And they know that if President Trump gets in the office in January, that the tables are then going to be turned. He didn't commit any crimes. They fabricated everything that they've done against him. But the individuals that are in power have committed crimes. Treasonous crimes, crimes against humanity. And if the tables are turned, they know that instead of them going after the American people, they're now going to use their forces to go after them.
So when did the raid happen for your house? Was it in the middle of the night? And what did you all think? I would have thought somebody's breaking into my house, and we're weaponized in this house. So it probably would have ended poorly.
Yeah, they actually came in the morning. They apprehended him at work in the parking lot before he had even walked into work. And then I was not home. I was traveling for work, and I was not home. And so I received a phone call from the FBI saying, hey, we just apprehended your husband, and we are currently raiding your house. They were there for about 5 hours, and they took 14 items. And, it was kind of, you were just in flight or fight mode. You really didn't know what to think. You're just trying to figure out the system, and then you go through all the different bond hearings, and he was granted bond here in the middle. I'm from Nashville, so here in the Middle District of Tennessee, this federal judge said there is no reason to detain this man. He was an upstanding citizen. He was a law enforcement officer, and he's not a flight risk. So he's not a dangerous community, not a flight risk. This man can be home pending trial. Well, the government did not like that, and so they appealed it, and then the case was moved to Washington, D.C., where he was denied bond continuously. And in my personal opinion, the reason he was denied bond continuously is because he was the best witness to a murder that happened at the hands of the Metropolitan Police.
Okay. Wow. And what did they take from your house? All your computers? Was it? Did they destroy your house when they come in?
Yeah,
I mean, what happens?
Oh yeah. They took his computers. Yeah, they leave everything a mess. They definitely don't put it back where they found it. They took his phone. They took his computers. They took the clothes that he wore that day. We had a Black American flag. People that don't know what a Black American flag is, basically means it's the opposite of a white surrender flag, saying you're not going to surrender. And they took that off of our front porch. And none of the stuff they used during trial, except for the clothes that he wore that day. But they took those items.
What? So they actually got the clothes. So I guess they had a picture of him that they were. Wow! It's not like it was, he was committing any murders. That is just insane.
Uh-huh.
And then, what was, because you said he was working in the sheriff's department, and obviously all of those guys are probably scared to death, but what is the community? Have they rallied behind you? Because it's just so shocking.
The law enforcement community hasn't, and I believe that's because the FBI went to them first, and they are scared. We have a bunch of cowards hiding behind badges, which is an absolute shame, because, I would want somebody that runs into action. I can tell you right now, people at the Williamson County Sheriff's Department here in Nashville, Tennessee, I wouldn't want a damn one of them coming in an emergency if they're hiding behind a badge for something like that.
And how long was your husband working there, Sarah?
He was a law enforcement officer for 7 years.
Oh my! So he had a history there,
and so and that's the thing, right? These individuals, when things are politically right, they'll stand behind it. But when things might be a little murky for it, they're like, well, we're not going to get involved with it, and that's a shame. And that's honestly why America is in the position that we are right now, is because of apathy. Enough good individuals sitting back doing nothing because it doesn't affect them personally. Because 3 years later, when I asked for a character reference for sentencing for him, they wouldn't even write a character reference saying, yes, I knew this man from this date to this date. He won awards, life-saving awards.
They're so scared.
They are. That is but that means the government has now won, because now they are scared to even stand up for the individuals that they supposedly cared about.
So do you have community or church that stands with you, Sarah? Because there have been some terrible things that have happened in this journey, but one thing I am extremely grateful for are the patriots that have come alongside of us in this journey and let us know that we are not alone in this. John, you had a question?
Yeah. I was going to say, I remember in typing class, what was the sentence you always practice? Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. What's happened, to our country? I mean, this is frightening. It seems like this is a post-constitutional country, and I don't know how you get it back. I mean, we can't, we have Republicans that want to act, and say, well, we need to follow the Constitution. And it's like, well, the other side's not following the Constitution. So how do we play back and fix this problem, or can it be fixed?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I say all the time, I can't believe we haven't taken our country back, and people can, look into that however they want to look into it. But, why we haven't is because it hasn't affected Americans yet, the majority of Americans, right? Right now, they can still go to the grocery store. They can still put gas in their tank because they're living off of credit cards that they know they're never going to be able to pay back. But once that credit card limit is maxed, once they go to the grocery store and they can't buy food for their kids or put gas in their car to go to and from work, when they go to their bank to pull their money out and the bank says, no, we're insolvent, we've taken your money, that's when it is going to hurt enough for the general public of America to say something is wrong here. But that hasn't happened yet. It's happened to small groups of people along the way that maybe, the general public empathizes with us and they care about it, but they don't want to get involved because they see what's happened to us and they say, well, I have kids, I have a job, so I can't say anything, I can't do anything. But we are headed down a path where we will have no country left to save if it gets to that point.
Wow. And because I feel fully now with what's gone against Trump and with all of these J6ers and hearing it straight from you as a J6er wife, that we are like totally a third world country. When I was a lieutenant, I was stationed in a third world country, and the corruption you could see it, and I'm seeing it here every day.
No, we absolutely are. We skipped straight over socialism. We went straight to communism and Marxism, and that's where we're at right now because we have a tyrannical government running this country.
And tell me how you partnered with Shane, the founder of this, and tell us a little bit about Shane.
Yeah, Shane has an incredible story. He knew the prison system prior to this, but he gave his life to the Lord and is completely changed his life. When you talk about somebody that was transformed by the blood of Christ, you can just see it written all over his face, the way he, changed his life around. And unfortunately, he found himself back behind bars after January 6th. And, it's kind of just given him a new direction for life and how he so cares about these individuals that maybe they did, make a dumb decision and they've served their time, but they shouldn't be a result of this broken system, this broken prison system that we have. And so, he was an incredible light to the individuals that were in Washington, D.C., because a lot of them, had never been into prison before and didn't understand what was going on. And so he was able to walk them through that journey and be able to minister to them and tell his life story. And so he is so passionate about helping these individuals, giving them a hand up instead of a hand out, and not letting them become a victim of this system. And so this Stand in the Gap was his brainchild, and he was like, hey, I need somebody to run it on the outside. And I'm like, I am always up for a challenge. Like, let's see what we can do to help these families. And so him and I basically birthed this, idea, and we've taken it and run with it. And the Lord has really just guided our path. To say, hey, like, why don't you look at this? Why don't you do this? And he's put incredible people in our lives to, because we had never done anything like this before. I came from the corporate world, and I never ran a nonprofit before, but the Lord has definitely provided in so many ways for us to be able to help these families.
Well, what you're doing is beautiful work.
I say it's a great story. God's people will always prevail over man's evil. I firmly believe that. And evil exists in this world, and I think we see it in the Democrat Party today. They're a godless, hateful party. I never thought the day would come when the government would seek vengeance on its own citizens, and that's exactly what January 6th is all about, is seeking vengeance on its own citizens.
So are you worried? Are you worried, Sarah? Because you're out front now. You're so vocal. You're so eloquent. Like when Tucker was taken out, it was so scary. But he's landed on X, and millions of people still follow what he does. Are you? Is it scary for you to be in this position, fighting this fight?
Every day I wake up and I ask the Lord to give me the strength to get through that day, not the next week, not the next year. I don't need to know what the future holds, but I definitely believe I have a hedge of protection around me. And we can't let fear and faith can't coexist, right? And so if we are so rooted in our faith and believe that the Lord is going to provide, we need to take up these shields and we need to take up these swords and help carry these people's cross and bear the burden that they have had to bear for so long. And so, I believe that it takes a village to do all of this, right? So not everybody can do what I have done and take up the leading role, but you can either fight the beast or you can feed the beast. And so I just encourage people to find their cause, get behind their cause, and move the needle, because so much is happening to our country, right? It's not just about January 6th. It's about the school board moms and indoctrinating our children. It's about our southern border. It's about pushing the vax mandate. There's so many different battles that are going on in this greater war. I believe we're in a spiritual war right now between good and evil. And we have gone too far of sitting back and doing nothing. And so we need to encourage and empower individuals to find their role and play their role in taking our country back.
So what do you want people to know about your husband, Colton?
What do I want people to know about him? He's a fighter. I believe all these January 6th defendants, especially, there's 220 of them incarcerated across America. And I believe that they are a shining light to the other inmates that they are in their facilities with, whether they're in D.C. or somewhere off in federal prison. He is just a man among men in the way that he talks and the way he articulates. And I believe that him, along with these other individuals, they've really been shown through this unfortunate hand that they've been dealt what their calling is in life. And so, they just to pray over these individuals, because I'm not going to lie, there are bad days as well. And so it's just the unfortunate side of life. We all have that. But, to just pray blessings over these people, to pray that they have the strength to continue to get through this, because it's different being on the other side of the wall, right? We can be so excited out here because Fisher was just overturned, or we can watch the debate and see that the left is just failing miserably. But when you're in a concrete box and you don't have any access to the outside world for the most part, we pray that the Lord will be with them. And it just goes back to, all the disciples that were in prison and what came of that. And I just believe that this is the very beginning, not only for Colton, but for all of these individuals. This is the beginning of something great for them. It's just been a long, arduous process to get to this point.
And then how do the other, like the real prisoners that are real criminals in prison, how do they interact with him? When you're a J6er?
Right, it's been fine. A lot of these individuals, once they get out into the federal prison, most of the federal prisons are in very rural areas of the country, and it's Trump country. The guards are like, we can't even believe you guys are in here. We've never seen anything like this before. Okay. The inmates, they love Trump. Trump did a lot for prison reform at the very end of his presidency. And so a lot of inmates, they just love President Trump, and they believe that these individuals stood for something on January 6th, and that's admirable to them.
And what does this election mean? John and I talk about this with every political guest. Like for us, it's a spiritual warfare. If we don't win in November, I don't know how our country's gonna, survive another 4 years of pagans.
Yeah, I think if Americans have their head in the sand that they think we're going to walk to the ballot box on November 5th and we're going to cast our vote and we're going to have a fair and free election, shame on us, because that's not what's going to happen. We have to go and vote on November 5th because it's our right as an American citizen to do so. But what we also have to do is ensure that there are poll watchers there, that we, take different shifts and not let the nefarious things happen. Don't let them put things into the windows so we can't see it. Don't let them, close down for a water main break that didn't even happen. We have to hold people accountable, and we also have to do our due diligence to ensure that we do our part on November 5th. This is the most historical election that we will ever have in American history.
Way.
That's if we have it.
Right.
That's if we have it. That's if they don't pull something and start World War III and say, sorry, we can't do an election anymore. I personally think we need to get the military involved and have a one-day in-person paper ballot election.
I love that. And then I pray that Trump gets in there, Sarah, and that your husband's pardoned. And I want all of these families to receive compensation. I've been saying like $5 million a family, because what they've been through is it has not been fair. And what we've done to Americans is just disgusting. So I'm sure you're on board with this as well.
Yeah, the sad thing about it is they could release these guys in the next 5 minutes. They could commute their sentences, they could give them pardons, but the damage has already been done. That's the thing, right? You throw these individuals into a 4x4, 6x6 box for 3 years. That you take away their families, you take away every right that they have. There is a long road ahead. So even if we do receive pardons, even if there is compensation, that's not going to change the fact that I personally believe, and something we want to do through Stand in the Gap, through our reentry program, is help these individuals become contributing members of society again. Because they even though that they have hope and they've had all of these things, right, they come back out into the real world. They can't even go to the supermarket and make a decision on something because they have been told what they can wear, when they can eat, when they can shower, when they can see their family, when they can make a phone call, what they can read, what they can write, all of these things for the last 3.5 years. They now have to unlearn all of that.
And what about the congressman from Texas, Troy Nell, seems to have been a big player to help you all.
Yes, he has. He has been one that is not afraid of a fight. He has been one that when he says something, he does something. I am forever grateful for him picking up the cause of certain things. Now, he can't do this on his own, right? He is one individual out of 535 members of Congress, but I will say that there are not a lot of individuals that are willing to pick up this torch for January 6th, but he has. And myself, my family, Colton, and all the January 6th defendants, because of his fortitude and his fight, are forever grateful for him.
And on the faith note, is there a passage that gets you, I don't know, some sort of psalm that you follow every day that's part of, you're so faithful. I've gotten that from talking to you. Or a motto that has helped you with this?
I don't. I have a lot of favorite scriptures, right? But really, it's my relationship with the Lord and how I look at it. I talk to the Lord like he's a friend, like he's a father. People want to put religion in this little box, and it's not. The Lord wants to do life with you. He wants to talk to you. He wants to hear about your troubles. That is your Father that cares about you. And I just believe sometimes he looks at us, he looks at me, and says, my child, if you only knew what I was doing, right? And so it's like we just have to have the faith every day. And it might not even be in this lifetime. We might not see the goodness. I pray that we do, but we might not see the goodness. It might be generations to come, and it could be because of you, this life has changed.
Well, so powerful. What have we missed, Sarah? You're the co-founder, executive director of Stand in the Gap Foundation. You're doing incredible work. You're the wife of, Colton McAbee. We want him out. What have we missed today talking with you?
Nothing. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I have a renewed hope and joy that this Fisher case has been overturned. Our fight is far from over. I do want the American people to know that, yes, we believe President Trump is going to get in. Yes, we believe that the Lord is going to right these wrongs, but we can't fight this fight alone. Even when pardons are handed down, that is not the answer. We can't continue to put it off and say, we're praying for you and President Trump's going to do this. No, this is a matter of the American people gathering and rallying around these people and saying, you know what, we're going to help bear your cross until you get home. And even when you do get home, we're going to walk this journey with you because you stood up for us on January 6th. You have shown, you have unveiled how terrible the Department of Justice and the FBI and these three-letter agencies are. And so we want to help you. And so that's what we need. We need the American public to rally behind us, whether it's financially donating to us, whether it's donating the time or the resources that they might have, because this journey is far from over for a lot of these individuals. I believe even after January 21st, 2025. It's a long journey home for them.
I agree with you, and I'm glad to see that you get that. This fight is more than just the people that are in prison. We pray for them to be released. We hope they'll be released soon. But the corruption in the government is not going away until we stand up. And I'm glad you recognize that and are going to continue that fight.
Yes, and I just encourage the people, find your cause and get behind your cause, because we, the people, have to be the people, and we are the ones that are going to take our country back, not some man riding on a white horse, not President Trump. It is going to be the millions of Americans that say we have a Constitution, and we're sticking to this Constitution.
Well, it's been wonderful talking with you. You are a J6 wife and warrior. We've been chatting with Sarah McAbee from Stand in the Gap, and we're going to be praying for you, Sarah, and for Colton and for all the prisoners. And God bless you. God put you in the right spot for this, and we thank you for joining Veronica Live.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving us this platform. God bless.